All righty. Well, thank you guys for joining us. So I have the absolute honor today to interview Jordan Patterson. So first, Jared, it is a huge honor to be speaking with you.
Thank you.
For those who don't know you, I'm gonna run through a little brief introduction. He's got a very impressive resume. So so hopefully I don't get tongue-tied going through this.
Yeah.
So Jared proudly serves the taxpayers and residents of House District 106, encompassing Eastern Denton County. Representative Patterson serves on 3 standing committees. These committees are the Business and Industry Committee, the Committee on Urban Affairs, and the Resolutions Calendar Committee. In 2019, Representative Patterson was appointed to serve as a member of the House Aggregate Production Operations Interim Study Committee, and in 2020 to serve on the Texas Cybersecurity Council. Professionally, Jared is the Director of Energy Services at Rapid Power Management in Carrollton. And
that's a mouthful.
Yeah. And it's an electric brokerage firm headquartered actually here in Carrollton. And I mean, this is such an impressive resume, but you also have such a commitment to the community. And I'm kind of wondering where does you have such a strong business presence, but you're so involved in the community, and where does that really come from? Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that comes from, I grew up in a small town north of here in Grayson County, a little town called Whitesboro. And my mom taught school for 38 years. My dad, actually 3 generations of my family were on the volunteer fire department there. My dad was fire chief on the volunteer fire department when I was little. My brother's actually the assistant chief on the volunteer fire department there now, and he serves as the emergency management coordinator for the town, and he's on the school board. So I've kind of grown up with, it was just ingrained in us at an early age that you could have an impact on your community. My dad also served on the school board there in Whitesboro when I was growing up for 9 years. So I really learned that you can have a pretty deep impact on your community if you just want to get involved, if you just showed an interest and got involved. And that's kind of what led me here. I mean, we lived in a little town called Saxe when we first got married, Leslie, my wife, and I, and I ended up on the city council there and serving on a few boards regionally. And then when we ended up pregnant with our 3rd child, we picked up and moved to Frisco, for the schools. And then one thing led to another, and here I am serving in the state legislature. So, if you're a go-getter, I guess, kind of be careful, because you'll end up getting involved and, getting some responsibility out of it, I guess.
That's awesome. And so you recently, and this is one of the many reasons I reached out, released a great video explaining property taxes and protesting any current increased home appraisals. Now, I know the video is already out there, but do you mind just briefly summarizing what the video was about, and anyone that might have an issue with their home appraisal at the moment, what they can do about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that's such a good topic. And, that video got a lot of play on Facebook. And, I think it ended up with, almost 7,000 views or somewhere in that neighborhood. And, I think the key is that with my background on city council and being in the state legislature and working on tax policy last session, I kind of take for granted some of the ins and outs that I think most people don't realize. Everybody gets in the mail their statement from their central appraisal district. And I think when they get that, they think, oh, this is the group that is in charge of my taxes. But the central appraisal district has never raised anyone's taxes. All they do is assess the value of your property. And so we absolutely should protest if we believe that we're not, seeing the fair market value of our property. But we also have to marry that with showing up at our cities, our counties, and our school districts, and then any special districts that we have, to those elected officials, because those are the ones that actually determine how much you pay in property taxes. It's not the appraisal district. It's 2 sides of a coin. You have your appraised value on one side of the coin, and then you have your tax rates on the other side of the coin. And I feel like so many people focus on the appraised value piece, which is incredibly important, but then they drop off when it's time to focus on the tax rates piece. And so that's what I wanted to do, is just kind of explain how that works, how our property taxes are calculated, and then what we did this past session to make sure that they can't grow as much as they've grown in the past.
That's awesome, because owning a home is really critical to living in a free society. I mean,
absolutely.
It's what separates us from so many countries, and what allows it to be the land of opportunity, really. So with that, there is a concern, because it does feel like property taxes and other things are going up. And it's one thing to be like, no, we don't want to, do this anymore. Are there any alternatives or things that both, just home residents in general could be looking into or talking with their city council? Are there alternatives to the increasing in the property taxes? And if so, what are some things we should maybe be thinking about or getting involved with at the city level?
Absolutely. And, property taxes is one of the biggest issues that folks talk to me about as a state representative. And especially 2 years ago in the campaign, it was the #1 issue.
Right.
This year it's probably going to be more health related, with the coronavirus situation. But, property taxes remains one of the biggest issues. The only problem is that I don't have a direct effect on anyone's property taxes. We don't have a statewide property tax in Texas. It's actually unconstitutional here to have one. So, people tend to go up the chain when really they need to be focusing on their city councils, their county commissioners, which run the counties, and then their school board members that run the school districts. Those are the entities that affect the actual property taxes that people pay. So, reaching out and getting to know members. I know, for example, after I posted that video, it encouraged people to get to know their city council members and their elected officials. I had Councilman John Keating and Councilman Brian Livingston in Frisco post their cell phone numbers in the thread, for people to reach out to them, because they want to talk to people. And I found in my experience, and I try to do this as a city council member myself, is to be as approachable as possible and to be as transparent as possible when it comes to those things. So, I think it's incumbent on folks to take the personal responsibility to reach out to their elected representatives at the local level and talk to them and try to understand. Each one of these entities holds a public meeting whenever they adopt a budget and a tax rate. And, there's hardly anybody ever there most of the time. So I don't think that our locally elected officials really feel the political pressure on the property tax front. The other thing is that it's kind of confusing. The whole property tax discussion is very confusing, because you'll have a lot of locally elected officials that come out and say, oh, I lowered your tax rate. Well, to me, that means, oh, well, then I'm paying less in taxes, right? No, that's not right, because if my value went up, my tax rate should have come down to completely offset the increase in property taxes. And so that's why this past legislative session, we passed a number of reforms, making sure that we really point to that total dollar amount that we pay in property taxes, not just the moving targets of the tax rates and the appraised values.
Right. So then how would you say that how is stepping away from increasing property taxes, stepping away from the regulation that sometimes just builders, realtors, business in general, because there has been a little bit of misconception. The more we regulate, the more it's going to help people. And so how can actually looking for ways to lower property taxes, looking for ways to deregulate some things, how is that actually going to make housing more affordable or keep it affordable?
Yeah, that's I love that question, because we get questions a lot, especially on the Urban Affairs Committee that I serve on, about housing cost and the cost of home ownership and making, affordable housing. And, it's my view that the government doesn't really have a role in, quote, making sure that we have affordable housing. That's for the market to decide. But the problem is that the government gets in a way a lot of times and actually increases the costs of home ownership. Property taxes is the #1 issue. Especially, I think you look in Frisco, when there was a study done, I think it was in 2019, and Frisco is one of the top 2 or 3 places to live in the state of Texas in terms of cost when you combine your mortgage rates plus your property taxes. And so it's just very expensive to live in North Texas in general, and that's a big barrier for most folks in terms of home ownership. But there's also other things, we built the house that we live in now, and the number of inspections and the number of times that the local government has to come out and do all these things, all of those regulatory pieces when you're constructing a home or when you're renting a home and you're in between renters, all of those regulatory pieces cost money, and they make it more expensive. They make the home price more expensive. They make the rent more expensive each time they do that. And so what I think needs to happen is that, these local governments have to make a decision and say, well, we could do all these things in the name of safety, but what do we really have to do? And what's being done that is just simply causing more bureaucracy and more cost associated with the homes? And so, I really want to applaud, you mentioned realtors, I really want to applaud the realtors in the state of Texas. They are a force down in Austin, and they helped us out tremendously, especially as it relates to property taxes, pushing for property tax reform and pushing to get, stricter caps on how much they can raise our property taxes before there's an increase. And so the realtors play a key role, not only personally for folks to be able to use that realtor's knowledge and all that on the market, and in their protesting, their appraised value, but also legislatively down in Austin, they're a huge force.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. So, and to kind of follow up on that, because, we are in a real unique time with everything that's happening. Do you have any advice for how realtors could really be in the forefront of their community right now? Is there anything they could be doing specifically, or anything you'd like to see them be more involved with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hate to tell them how to do their jobs. I mean, my dad is a real estate broker. My brother's a realtor. He is a firefighter and a realtor. And, I would hate to tell them how to do their jobs, but one piece of advice I could offer is just, keep putting yourself out there and letting your clients know what you can do for them during this small window of time when people are trying to protest their values. I've received a number of calls into my office about the appraised value and that they think that it's ridiculous how much their value went up. And, I've asked many of them, I said, well, how long have you lived in your home? Oh, we've lived here a couple of years or whatever. I said, well, are you still in contact with your realtor? Because your realtor can put together some comps to show you what the actual cost of your home, should be in the fair market. And so that's incredibly helpful. So, if I could offer one piece of advice, I know that some realtors are doing that, but you'll just continue to put yourself out there to be a service to the folks that you represent to the marketplace, even after the sale. And, I would suspect that's just a good business practice in general.
Oh, absolutely. And then something that I'm a little bit passionate about, and I just think it's awesome because you're a young man yourself, very accomplished. What message do you have for the youth today and about owning property? And I know there's been a little bit of a loss in the value in just terms of educating. And, is there any encouragement about marketing to the millennial and the younger generation and to get back into why? I mean, this is the biggest piece of building wealth, creating a legacy. Do you mind sharing on that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, in terms of building wealth, I learned at 23, I bought my first home, and it was because I was paying rent in Addison, and, I was paying so much a month, and I was thinking, man, I mean, I could, instead of throwing this out the window every month, and, nothing against the apartment operators, but,
Right.
It's expensive to rent. And so, for those that can, to be able to save a little bit and to put that down and to start building that wealth, and all of a sudden, you build some equity and you sell that home and get to the next one and so on and so forth. And so I just can't imagine, young people not wanting to or not realizing that vision that, that's really a key component of not only, having a diverse portfolio of investments,
Right.
but in terms of planting roots in a community and actually being a part of the community. Not that you can't do that renting by any means. I mean, there's a lot of folks that have to rent, especially these days right now, there's probably going to be a lot of new renters out there because so many people have lost their jobs, unfortunately, due to this coronavirus situation. But, you know, it seems like folks are a little bit more stable in their communities. They tend to vote more. They tend to be more involved in the school system and all that if they own their own property. And, you know, it's just a huge opportunity for young people. I actually think the biggest issue that we have in terms of home ownership is kind of twofold. Number one, we don't teach things like mortgages and you know, auto loans and those types of things in school very much anymore. And I think that that's something that if your parents aren't, you know, sending it down to you, you know, we've got to have those types of courses in school. But the other piece of this is that so many young people have been failed by the system of student loan debt. And, you know, you've got so many young people my age and in their 20s and early 30s that are saddled with all this student loan debt, and they can't even think about buying a home because of all that. And, you know, so that's from a policy perspective, that's something that, especially on the federal level, and then in our state colleges, you know, the rise in tuition costs and all that we really have to look at and get student loans under control so that we can have another generation coming up that not only appreciates home ownership, but can participate in home ownership.
Right. I completely agree. And thank you so much for that. Now I have a couple questions
Yes.
That's a couple realtors wanted me to ask. So if you don't mind, if
Yeah, absolutely.
I could just ask this. So now there has been some talk of possibly a new real estate law that if you reinvest the money off of the profit that you made from that sale within 45 days, there could be some tax breaks or tax incentives. What law exactly is that? What's that looking like? And how does that kind of different from a 1031 exchange?
Yeah, you know, I'm actually not familiar with that. You know, if there's talk about it, then, you know, maybe that's something that could happen. You know, the thing about the Texas legislature is we meet every other year for 5 months. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, all the bills that will be filed by incumbent legislators can start at the end of this year and go, you know, into the session. And then we've got like 2 or 3 months to pass everything through both houses and get it to the governor's desk. I mean, it's really a crazy whirlwind time. And so it's hard to keep up with every single piece of legislation. I do know right now, you know, isn't it true that if you sell a property within 10 years and you make a profit on it, you have to pay taxes? And so maybe what they're talking about is, you know, maybe doing away with that, you know, to where you can buy a property and you know, maybe earn some additional revenue on it, not have to pay taxes. I would support that. You know, anything that, you know, I'm all about, you know, any way to lower the cost of government for folks and encouraging investment. You know, I think there's a big difference between the government investing through economic development incentive dollars and using our tax dollars to develop that way, and doing what really is the reason why Texas has been so successful economically, which is creating lower tax burdens and fewer regulations so that businesses can thrive and so that investors can thrive. And so anything that falls in that category of reduced regulation or reduced taxes, I'm all for it.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And no, so this will be the last question. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of confusion right now with COVID-19, the cans and cannots.
Yes.
But so if a realtor happens to have a property and the owners are out of town, are they allowed to still host a physical open house? Or,
you know, I don't know, because this is so fluid right now. Yep. You know, I tried to, actually, you sent me that one in advance and I tried to find the answer to it and I couldn't find it right now. Here's what I would say. This coronavirus situation is very serious. You know, there have been, you know, not the hospitals haven't been overrun like they thought. The numbers of people that, especially in Texas, the numbers of people that have gotten the virus hasn't materialized like they thought that it would. But that doesn't mean that it's not serious. Texans have done a remarkable job of social distancing and being responsible as it relates to the coronavirus. And that's why the numbers are so low. you know, if you look at it, I think it's like 2.7% of the people that get the coronavirus die from the coronavirus. Of course, most of those have underlying health issues. But if we go back to just business as usual and all 29 million Texans get the coronavirus, that's something like 700,000 deaths that could happen in Texas if the numbers, you know, hold out and continue. I don't think that it's going to get that bad, because I think that, you know, most of the deaths that have occurred have had underlying health issues and all of that. But what I would say is, you know, maybe on May 18th, you know, I think that's the next round of opportunity for businesses to expand in the state of Texas per the governor's orders. What I would say is, look, if you want to wear a mask, if you want to make sure that the door handles are clean and you don't accept more than one family at a time inside the home, you know, I think that's probably the way to do it, just so that you're being careful, you know, sanitizing the front door, the doorbell, making sure that folks wear a mask, having the realtor wear a mask, especially if they're coming in contact with a lot of people. I'll tell you the hardest part about this for me, especially in, you know, being a quote politician, even though I hate that term, is not shaking hands with people. I want to shake hands with everybody, and, you know, we've had some people by the house to do some work, and we've had some things, you know, I've run into somebody at Kroger, you know, that sort of thing. And I mean, I just want to run up and shake their hand, and I can't, and I almost feel rude for not doing it, you know. But I think as long as we practice social distancing measures, we clean, and folks wear a mask if they would, I think that's all that you could ask for. And I think that folks ought to be able to start doing that pretty quick.
Yeah, I do too. I think Texas has done a great job through this whole entire time. I've been in Texas for a little bit over a year, and I joke it's the greatest place ever. Best move I ever made.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love to hear that. That's for sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes. Well, Jordan, Jared, thank you so, oh my gosh, thank you so much for this. This has been just awesome. And is there any place that people could find you or submit questions to you, or how can you be reached?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on all the social media platforms. You know, my Twitter and Instagram is @Jared L. Patterson. My Facebook page is facebook.com/JPattersonTX. And then we recently revamped my website as well.
Okay.
JaredPatterson.net. There's a lot of good information there, including links to a lot of my press releases on things, a number of which have happened in the last 2 months, obviously, with everything going on. That video that you talked about is on YouTube, and you can find it there or on my Facebook page. And, you know, if I had one thing to leave people with, it's number one, protest your property taxes or your appraised value with the Central Appraisal District, but don't stop there. You know, there's more to do after you protest your value. There's reaching out to the taxing entities, getting to know your elected officials on every level, and getting to know them and giving them your opinion. I think the worst possible thing that we could do in 2020 on people is raising their property taxes. As the last thing that should happen. Look, governments are going to be struggling. The state government's going to be struggling for revenue. Local governments are going to be struggling for revenue. But this is the time when we've got to really tighten our belt and cut as much as we possibly can without affecting, you know, public safety, and, you know, let the chips fall where they may. I mean, I cannot imagine any elected official going out there when over 11,000 people in my district have claimed unemployment, you know, in the last few days, and say, oh, we need more money, we're going to raise your property taxes.
Right.
So I think if everyone gets together and lets their voice be heard, that won't happen.
No, I completely agree. And again, I just thank you for joining us for this call.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed the call.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Jared.